Critic Nick Hilditch of the BBC called this very much a film of the 80s in its portrayal not of moral decline, there is little declining left to do, but of unstoppable egocentrism, with guns. New York Times critic Vincent Canby wrote, "The dominant mood of the film is anything but funny. It is bleak and futile. What goes up must always come down. When it comes down in this film, the crash is as terrifying as it is vivid and arresting." And of the 1932 original, the Times UK staff says that what it has, and what the many other gangster films that have followed it have not, is an ice-cold anger of purpose. On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, we decide the fate of Scarface.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters. Okay, today we're talking about Scarface. Here at Ruined Childhoods.
Everybody, that's not Tony. That's not Tony.
It's not Tony Montana. It's not Al
Don't
Pacino.
worry.
It is our guest for today, Cesar Gracia. Here I am trying to get fancy with pronunciation.
Yeah, and everybody, anybody who's a longtime listener would remember him from our Zorro episode, which I'm so sad that I wasn't part of that conversation, but I loved listening to it. So thank you again for that one, Cesar.
Thank you. That was fun. Yes.
Now we need no explanation as to why Cesar is a guest on this episode. As we were saying, as I said to John, and as we were saying earlier, we could not do this episode without him. And
it's true.
You know, he brings a perspective to Scarface, particularly the 1983 version of Scarface, directed by Brian De Palma, that neither John nor I will bring to it. And, you know, you may not, this might be a movie that you've seen, you know, dozens of times, if not more, you, the listener. But I think that hearing Cesar talk about this movie and about his upbringing, and I'll let him get into that, it's really clear why we could not do a Scarface episode without him. So here we are.
Yeah. And it's also important to note, as this is a podcast that talks a lot about reboots and sequels and stuff like that, that the 1983 Scarface is a remake of a 1932 movie. So for anybody out there who's just like, oh, remakes are blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, guess what? Like this one that you really love, that's a remake.
And it says it at the end. At the end of the movie, after the shootout, it says dedicated to Howard Hawks and Ben Hesh.
Yes.
Right.
Who were the directors and writers of the original Scarface.
Yeah, that's right. And I gotta say, after watching the 1932 version, I appreciated the 1983 version even more because it's a really smart remake in that it doesn't just do it the same exact way in the sense of like, you know, an Italian Chicago mob movie, but it really takes the key elements in a lot of those key scenes and adapts it to a current thing at the time.
But kept a whole lot, even lines of dialogue.
Yeah.
I would say even lines of dialogue are taken. Like he
exactly.
Oliver Stone kept a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of the original. And when you first glance, you're like, oh, it's like a black and white, you know, like 1930s. But you go like, oh no, this is like beat by beat lines of dialogue, like everything.
Yeah.
But the Cuban cocaine thing is thanks to Sidney Lumet.
Yeah.
It was before Brian De Palma was on board. Sidney Lumet was one who came up with like, because they're going to make a 30s period piece. And Sidney Lumet goes like, well, there's this thing going on now in Miami with the Cubans and the cocaine. It should be that. And then I guess he wanted to get more political. And then I guess Marty Bregman was like, nah, And then Brian De Palma was brought in, but Oliver Stone, I guess,
yeah.
ran with that idea and then wrote that whole thing.
Well, his two favorite things, politics and cocaine.
Yeah.
At least at that time. At least at that. I'm sorry. At least in the 1980s.
And that's on the record too.
Yeah,
it's not like Dan's exposing anything about Oliver Stone.
No, I said I wouldn't tell, but yeah, Ollie and I used to do lines in the Viper room. No, of course not. Of course not. But anyway, so anyway, yeah, we're talking about both versions of Scarface, and I totally agree with John that after watching the original, it made me appreciate what was added to the 1983 version. But the 1983 version is the one that more people know. Like you said, a lot of people probably don't realize it's a remake and don't understand the credits at the end. Who's Howard Hawks? Fuck that.
Right.
So I did not see this until like well into my teens on VHS. John, do you remember your first time seeing it?
I think that I've seen it like probably when I was in high school, but the first time that I watched it to really like watch it was when I was in my mid 20s, maybe like 26 or 27. And I didn't connect with it as much as I did when I did it on my watch last week. And then I really wish that I would have watched the 1932 version first and then the 83, but I did it opposite of that. But I definitely saw it in a very different way. As we grow older, we have different sensibilities. We have different things that, stick out to us a little bit more. And, really understanding what was going on in Cuba at the time helps put everything into the right context. I didn't necessarily, of course it was 83. These things happened a lot then, but didn't love that it was not a Cuban person playing the lead Cuban role. I think there was only one person of Cuban descent in the movie.
Yeah. I want to talk about that more, but Cez, so tell us about when you first saw Scarface, what your circumstances were, and we'll sit back.
Okay. Yeah, it was 1983. I was 7 years old, and I guess it was like they were advertising. My brother's 8 years old, so he was like 14 or something at the time, and he was like really down to see it, and it was this new movie, whole thing, whatever. So the whole family got together. It was like me, my mom, my dad, my brother. We had my mom's friend Chicho, who actually had come through the Mario Boat Lift and ignored it. We had two people with us who had actually come through the Mario Boat Lift. We get to, there's a supermarket there now, but it used to be a theater called Hialeah Cinemas. And we went there, and that place was jam-packed. And out in the back seat, it was crowded. It was a big hoopla. There was a bunch of Cubans there. And all I kept hearing was like, oh, El Padrino, El Padrino, El Padrino. Because Pacino was known for The Godfather. So it was like, oh, El Padrino's playing a Cuban. El Padrino's playing a Cuban. The Godfather's playing a Cuban. I don't know who the fuck is what, whatever. So I get in there, and it was tense. I think Castro, at the beginning of the movie, you see Castro talking about like the Mariel people, whatever. And people were like, there's grunts already in the theater. And as soon as that guy comes out, it's like, Antonio Montana. And you? What's your name? That first smile with the haircut. The whole theater, we were like we're like, oh my God, it's like, this guy has us. Like, they know we're here. Because we're like this like small little like Hispanic community, like no one really knew about us. That was the first time we were like, oh, we're in fucking Hollywood, and here's a big guy doing it. What gave it legitimacy, though, and at that time we just accepted Hollywood people to play Hispanic. Marlon Brando played a Mexican. But there's one guy, which is Stephen Bauer, and we knew who he was because there was a PBS sitcom called Que Pasa USA. Andy Garcia was in one episode, but he was a teenage son, and at the time his name was Rocky Echevarria. His great grandfather has the Bauer last name, so when he went to Hollywood, he changed it to Stephen Bauer. But the whole audience goes like that. We know that guy is Cuban, and so I remember. It was there was two things that stick out. One was we were just watching this movie. I'm little, and it was a pretty, and that's a huge impression. The first one, he's in the South Beach getting chained up. We were like, oh no, he's in trouble. And as soon as those sunglasses appear, which is Stephen Bauer, which is like our boy from Miami, coming to save Pacino's ass. Fuck man, was that theater screaming like it was like ahora tú, and that grrr, like he just rips that door open with a machine gun. That fucking dude was like, ah, it was just screaming, dale, coño, dale. And I'm like shaking in my seat, like just going, oh my God, it's like thrilling. And I think the rest of the movies, I mean, it was 3 hours long. I think I had to pee like pretty bad, but I couldn't fucking move. And then was that ending, that the last ending when he's just fucking coked out. People are kind of like bummed out, whatever. And then he's doing like, you're fucking with me, you're fucking with the best man. I remember that theater. I remember it was Dignota was extreme. My brother says it was just Dignota, but I guess it was this black friend of my mom's who just came from Mirabeau, lived really fucking proud Cuban. She was like screaming, but it did feel in my memory. It felt like a handful of people were like up and screaming at the screen as he was fucking shooting at everything, and I was like jumping, and then he gets shot, and everybody's like, "Oh, I fucking got out."
Yeah.
Like, I guess they were hoping he would win or something, and then we just cleared. And that we had an intermission. There was an intermission in that. That was like we had to step out and go back. That was my pee break, and I remember going back in. There was an intermission in that movie, and then we're leaving, and I remember like one of the parents was like, and that's why we say no to drugs, because that was like the thing. But me and my friend Ernie was Chicho's son. He also came from Maribol. He was like my age, like a year older than me. We walked away like, what did we just see? And I was like,
And you were 7, you said?
And I didn't see it in the theater again until the 20th anniversary. Huh?
You were 7 when you saw it the first time?
I was 7. Yeah, I was 7 years old.
That's amazing.
And then from that, then when it hit VHS, I think I saw it like a billion more times in the house.
Right.
And then so I just been a lifelong fan of that movie. It affected me. My brother named Tony, Dan would know. See, we got affected by the movie differently. Both got affected. I wanted to be Pacino. My brother wanted to be Tony Montana. He ended up serving 18 years of drug trafficking. I ended up, doing theater.
Going into entertainment.
But
Wow.
yeah.
Actually, and then,
Becoming Pacino.
doing the Al Pacino show, doing the Al Pacino School of Acting.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah, so it was a lifelong fascination with the movie. I think it was in the late 80s, I think it was late 80s that my brother knew it was a remake. I had no idea. And we found a VHS. And I'm like, it's the original Scarface. I was like, what? And I ended up watching that on repeat for quite some time.
Oh, cool.
As well, too. So I got into a huge... So I've been able to watch it objectively, but there is that experience I just can never get away from. So I am kind of like... I am emotionally attached to that movie.
Yeah.
And I think that explains why.
That makes a lot of sense. For anybody who hasn't seen the original, why don't I do a little synopsis of the original, and then we'll get more into the 1983.
I think the only comparison would be if, like, to my experience of, like, if you're an Italian American kid in Philadelphia watching Rocky.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
got it.
You mean because I'm a Cuban American in Miami, surrounded by Cubans watching Scarface. Like, I'm sorry, it was just like a huge. I guess you would have to be like, like that, like an Italian, or from Notre Dame watching Rudy,
yeah,
like, or something. Like, if you had like, one of those things where everything aligns, you're like, oh shit, here we are. Go ahead.
No. I'm glad that you added that. That's a really good perspective and comparison for a lot of people.
I was thinking about that, as a similar topic, but yes, please synopsize.
Well, I'm going to synopsize, and then afterwards, Cesar, if I miss anything or mischaracterize anything, even from the 1932 version, because I've only seen it once, and apparently you've seen it a ton of times, feel free to correct me or add anything that I've forgotten. All right, so Tony Camonte is a low-level goon for Italian mob boss Johnny Lovo, but gets in good when he makes a kill that helps Johnny control Chicago's entire South Side, mostly with access to then illegal booze. But that's not enough for Tony. He gets greedy and also wants control over the North Side. Everything turns around for Tony once he gets a hold of a new type of machine gun called a Tommy gun. When Johnny sees that Tony is making advances on his main squeeze, Poppy, he orders a hit on Tony. When that backfires, Tony takes it upon himself to kill Johnny. But Tony takes it way too far when he kills Gino, his BFF, for shacking up with his kid sister, Cheska. What he doesn't know is that they're in love and just got married. Gino's murder alerts the police to Tony's whereabouts, and they mow him and Cheska down with a cascade of bullets. That's just my very brief synopsis for the 1932 version because I wanted to leave more room for the 83 version, which is way more dense. But, you know, as anybody who's seen the 83 version knows, the relationship with the sister is a huge point. You know, in the 32 version, you have Poppy. In the 83 version, you have Elvira, who's played by Michelle Pfeiffer, and they both played things very, very differently. And yeah, I don't know.
Also,
Did I forget anything, Cesar?
Coming off of no, I just wanted to throw a shout out for Michelle Pfeiffer. She was coming off of Grease 2 into Scarface, so that's how awesome she is.
Yeah, and they didn't want to cast her either, but she, you know, she was the choice.
No, she killed it.
Yeah.
I thought it was Frank Lobo. It's Johnny Lobo?
Well, no, so John was doing the 32 version.
Oh, I was doing the 32 version. The 32 version is Johnny.
Yeah.
Right, now, yeah, and then in 83, it's Robert,
Lobo.
my favorite orange juice spokesperson, Robert Loggia.
Robert Loggia is Frank Lopez.
I'm sorry. Those were the best. Before you launch into the synopsis, he did those commercials for Minute Maid orange juice, I think it was, where like I don't know what, like the kids sitting at the breakfast table and the parents are there and the kids like not jazzed about drinking orange juice, and then Robert Loggia comes in wearing like an all black suit, and I think this was like right after like Lost Highway came out, and it was like this kid who's like 10 is like, Robert Loggia in my kitchen, and I was like, I am the only 10-year-old who would have reacted that way.
Try some new Minute Maid orange tangerine. It's got calcium.
Then I'm not drinking it.
Oh, no, it's sweet. You'll like it.
I don't believe you.
Well, then who would you believe?
I don't know, Robert Loggia. Whoa, Robert Loggia.
Billy, your mother's right. New Minute Maid orange tangerine tastes great. And it's got as much calcium as milk.
If you say so, Mr. Loggia.
Yeah.
This is great.
Enjoy your breakfast.
New Minute Maid orange tangerine with calcium.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
It was like Robert Loggia trying to strong arm this family into drinking Minute Maid orange juice. It was great.
It was funny. In Scarface, it was like an added touch. He's a Cuban.
He's what?
There's a thing. Cubans are Cuban Jews.
Oh.
And if you look at Frank Lopez in Scarface, he's got a Star of David in his chain.
He's wearing a high. I noticed he was wearing the high at one point.
Yeah.
And hacha is an old Yiddish word for a pig doesn't run straight.
Right. Okay. You know what? They don't explain it, but you talk about feeling seen. Talk about feeling seen in a movie. It's when I saw the trailer for Goodfellas and they just showed the shot of Ray Liotta with like the Star of David around his neck along with the cross. I was like, what a Jewish, I'm in for this. But yeah. They play it a little more subtly here in oh, and you know who else is in the 83 Scarface? I saw this guy do stand up once.
Richard Belzer?
Richard Belzer.
No, ironically not Richard. So a person who I saw stand up in New Jersey who was not Richard Belzer. Angel Salazar. Check it out.
Yeah. Who plays Chi-Chi.
Who plays Chi-Chi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. It's always
nice and I love his outfits in it. Anyway, so now the synopsis for the 83 Scarface.
Okay, so I'm gonna let you know first that the first few sentences are a very like brief, tightened up version of the full story of how we start this movie. So and Cesar, some of the stuff that you said earlier fills this in more, and we'll talk more about it soon. But that's just my disclaimer before I get started, because you could really, synopsis could be an hour long. It's crazy. All right, so Tony Montana is an anti-Castro Cuban prisoner sent to America in an effort from Fidel to exile his opposers and, as the film's introduction states, the dregs of his jails. In an effort to earn his way out of Freedom Town, a Cuban refugee camp for those deemed less than worthy by the U.S. government to enter, Tony kills an adversary to a local drug kingpin. After doing so, Tony and his pal Manny are given green cards and work their way up the corporate ladder in Frank Lopez's cartel. Later, Tony and Omar, another of Frank's associates, head to Bolivia to visit Alejandro Sosa, one of the largest manufacturers of cocaine. Though Omar is hesitant to make any decisions, Tony comes up with a few ideas and gives the impression that he has the right to do so. Then, Sosa has Omar killed, telling Tony that he's a narc. Back in the US, Frank is pissed that Tony was so cavalier with his conversations with Sosa. As Tony gets more and more bold in his dealings that usurp Frank's authority, Frank hires some goons to off Tony at a Sweet Richard Belzer comedy show. Tony slips away and confirms that Frank was behind it, so he kills Frank, overtaking Miami's largest drug cartel, and moves distribution of Sosa's cocaine to other parts of the country. He also manages to take control of Elvira, Frank's main squeeze. A while later, Sosa has a mission to ask of Tony, and in exchange, Sosa will get Tony out of legal trouble that would otherwise put him in prison for several years. Sosa wants Tony to help his number one goon assassinate an activist who's making strides in exposing Sosa and a number of the other large figures in the drug trade. Tony agrees, but puts the kibosh on it when the car that they're about to bomb is also carrying the activist's children, which is a soft spot for Tony. Having not completed his mission, Sosa sends his army to Miami to kill Tony. Meanwhile, during all of this, Tony is trying to help his family out who live in Miami. His mother wants nothing to do with his lifestyle, but his little sister Gina is gracious for his help. She ends up frequenting a lot of the same clubs that Tony visits, much to Tony's chagrin. Tony repeatedly tries to put a stop to Gina canoodling with the thugs in the cartel world. She ends up shacking up with and eventually marrying Tony's BFF Manny, all behind Tony's back. When he finds them together, he kills Manny, but hasn't yet learned that they have been married a day earlier and we're going to surprise Tony with the news. That's the end of the synopsis. Caesar, what did I mess up or miss?
Nothing. That's all there.
Whew.
One thing I wanted to say first was the 32 version is actually the first gangster movie, so it kicks off the genre.
Oh, really?
That's one. Yeah, it does. It's the first one. And there's also two. Most mob movies have like a real event. Most fictional mob movies have a real event that they kind of play homage to or do a wink to. The Godfather is with the Frank Sinatra story, right? That's sort of like with Johnny Fontaine. And the original Scarface, the 1932 version, does the Valentine's Day Massacre.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The Valentine's Day Massacre with Al Capone taking over Bugs Moran or whatever. And so they do an homage to this Valentine's Day Massacre in the original Scarface. In the 83, the wink there's two winks. One, the chainsaws actually did happen, but it was to an FBI agent. If you watch Tiger King, the guy, he's in West Palm Beach now. He was like it was an FBI informant. They fucking chainsawed his ass up. The calamities are pretty rough. And also the when he tries to kill that guy, that what gets him in trouble with Sosa, when they put that bomb under that car,
right? And
he was like, no women or children. You guys, we gotta kill him now. And Tony's like, no man, because he had the kids in the car. He's like, sin mujeres sin hijos, like without women and children. And then like he kills the guy and also gets him in trouble with Sosa. That was actually like another one too. They were gonna off somebody and they had a bomb in the car, and it was because there was kids nearby that mission was abandoned. So those are two little real events that are actually in Scarface.
And what's interesting is it reminded me there's a similar scene in Munich where they're gonna where they've got a bomb planted, and it's been a while since I've seen Munich too, but
the little girl.
Yeah, with the little girl, which is it's interesting because I make the connections because Spielberg actually visited the set, and there's one shot in this movie directed by Spielberg
during the final shootout.
Yeah.
And then De Palma's also got another thing with the little girl getting blown up in The Untouchables, the beginning of The Untouchables.
The Untouchables.
Yeah. So
interesting. Yeah,
it's interesting.
Right.
De Palma's a filmmaker. Have either of you seen the documentary De Palma?
I haven't. No.
I saw part of it. The first half.
It's definitely worth checking out. He's such an interesting filmmaker because he comes up from in that group with Scorsese and Coppola and Lucas and Spielberg and I'm sure there's somebody else I'm forgetting, but And De Palma's kind of like the only one that doesn't really like break out of, I don't know if you'd call it just like genre flicks or whatever, but I think for a long time he was written off as like a hack, but just like in revisiting a lot of his work, I don't know. I feel like De Palma he's like kind of all over the place, but I like that about him as a director. You know, like he made Casualties of War, this great, you know, Vietnam set drama inspired based on the My Lai massacre, and he does
and the Puerto Rican sequel to Scarface is Carlito's Way.
Carlito's Way. I love Carlito's Way.
Carlito's Way.
That's also De Palma, and that escalator shot coming down.
Yeah,
I need to watch that again. It's been a long time since I've seen Carlito's Way.
At the end, I let that. By the way, John, that synopsis was hilarious. I mean, no, that is the whole movie. It's just hilarious how they wrote that whole thing. Both.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to really condense everything down to just that. But you know.
Oh, here we go. So, what is here? I'll give you this one. What are the comparisons that you saw? Like, or like, oh, they did this in 32 and they did this in 83.
Well, I'm glad you asked because we pulled a couple of clips and I just have the audio of them, but I'm going to play a couple of them. First, I'll do the 1932 version and then I'll do the 1983 version. So one of them that Dan had asked me to get was where Tony, they are Tony in both of them, are told to get themselves a girl while they are actively trying to get their boss's woman from them.
Yeah.
Why don't you get yourself a girl, Tony?
I'm working on that now.
Yeah? Well, don't tire yourself out.
And then here's the 83.
Hey, Toad, why don't you find your own girl?
My own girl?
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing, huh?
Oh, you go do it somewhere else. Get lost.
Frank.
Hey, maybe I don't hear so good sometimes.
And then in the 32 version and the 83 version, one scene that stuck out to me, it's clear, like, you got to use this part in the remake, but where it's after the assassination attempt on Tony's life, and Tony and his goons developed this plan to have somebody call the boss's office, Johnny or Frank, depending on which one you're talking about. So here's the 32 version.
You call Johnny Lobo at his office at 10 minutes past 2, see? At 10 minutes past 2. You say that you called from the country now, see? You one of the guys that took me for a ride. Hey, the car got smashed, and I got away. Hey, the car got smashed, and I got away.
Yes.
You think it was Johnny? I don't know, but we'll find out now. We'll be there when Pietro calls. And if it was Johnny, he'll stall, won't he?
Sure.
And now here's the one from 83.
You call Lopez. You call him at his office at 3 o'clock sharp. Okay? And you tell him, we fucked up. He got away.
Okay.
You got it?
Yeah.
What are you gonna say?
We fucked up. He got away.
What time?
3 o'clock sharp.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so there's plenty of other moments where they pretty much take the dialogue and modernize it for sure. In 1932, no one was saying "I fucked up." Unfortunately, that
although
would be fun.
it is pre-code.
Pre-code, yeah, it could have.
Well, it's interesting. So, go ahead, Cece.
Yeah, so both movies start off with an interrogation. The first time you see Tony Kamane, he's being interrogated by the cops. First time you see Tony Montana, he's being interrogated in immigration, and then they both start off with Tony doing a hit. The 1932, when he's whistling and you see his shadow and they kill somebody, that gets him into the interrogation. You're like, yeah, me and that guy, we were like this. He does the whole thing. The 83 is backwards. You see the interrogation. Then later on, he does a hit on Rebenga to get out of Freedom Town. Yeah. They're working on Your Own Girl. The car with the bulletproof. You don't see him use the bulletproof in the 83 version, but you see him order bulletproof windows for the Porsche. And then in the 32 version, you see when they're doing the shootout, when they're chasing him, you see the bulletproof windows. what was the other one? There's also the part where she says when he's actually like laying it heavy on Johnny Lovo's wife, that she says, "Well, what about Johnny?" Tony is like, "I like Johnny, but I like you better." And it's the same exact line in the 83 where it's like, "What about Frank?" Tony is like, "I like Frank, but I like you better." He throws the same thing. In the in the 32 version, he's giving little boy, played by I blanked on his name. He's from the Alphabet City in Manhattan. He's the gangster in freaking Some Like It Hot. He plays the main gangster. He's little boy in Scarface. Oh, I blanked on his name. George Raft. George Raft, right? Anyway, yeah, George Raft. He the flipping the coin. Tony's giving him advice, and he says like, "I live by 3 rules." He's like, "You gotta, it's this. And you gotta get them before they get you." He gives him like 3 little like a weird advice. Same scene in The Fountain Blue. He's like, first you get the money, then you get the power. Then you have the power and the money. You get the what? But there's a scene where Tony's giving that guy advice in both versions. Slightly different, but it's there. And then the same way that they kill Johnny Lobo, same way they kill Frank Lopez.
And that dialogue is famously, I don't know, parodied in 1998's Basketball with Trey Parker and Matt Stone. First, you get the khakis, then you get the jobs. Right. I forget how the rest of it goes, but
then
Well, one thing that I want to mention that's different between the two is how things end up between Tony's sister in each one, because in 1932 at the very end, she's like, her new husband has just been killed by her brother, and she's like, "It's okay, Tony, I'm over it. I'm going to help you, blah, 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 blah." But in the 83 version, she's like, she kind of messes with him and she's planning to kill him. And she's like, "Oh, I get it. You want to sleep with me. That's what you want? Is that what you want to do?" And there's this very dramatic scene, and which is very incredible. And huge shout out to Mary Elizabeth Master Antonio. I hope I'm saying that right. I always slip up on that. But man, she's so good as his sister.
She's great. And when she comes in and she's got like the nightgown on and she basically calls it out, and you're sitting there watching it being like, well, we've all been thinking this. And it's like, I'm glad she's calling this out.
Yeah. But I got to say, in the 32 version, and big shout out to Anne Dvorak, who plays Cheska, the sister, I found her to be really entertaining. And the scene, do you guys remember the scene where she's first going up to Gino and she's just like, "Ha-cha-cha-cha-cha, look at me, don't you want to go dance?" And he's like, "If your brother saw you wearing that, he'd go crazy." And he's like, "You're just a kid." And she's like, "I'm 18. See, I'm going to do a little tap dance. Ha-cha-cha-cha-cha. I'm an adult now." And like, I have adult thoughts. And I loved watching any Cheska scene. It was so good. But very different from Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio.
I do have one question while we're on the topic of Cheska. Well, really more Gina. All right. So here's where I don't necessarily feel bad for her or Manny, because, all right, they arguably know Tony perhaps better than anyone in the world.
Yeah.
How could they have possibly thought that surprising him with news of their marriage would have ended well?
Yeah, it's kind of a bonehead move.
I'm like, he wants to fuck her. He's like really possessive and jealous. And if he's like, "Oh, my best friend's been fucking my sister and now they're married," like, especially, of course he's going to kill someone. That's what he does.
Especially with that warning in the car that, "Hey, she's not for you. Okay? She's not for nobody."
Yeah.
You don't get that in the 32 version, but the other one, he
not
like,
a good
friends him.
Not a good choice for a surprise. But anyway, I wanted to come back to, so one of the things that as we were talking about, the 1983 version really adds well, is putting it in the context of not just immigration, but the boat lift,
right,
and that influx of Cuban refugees. So now, Cesar, your family, when did your family come over from Cuba?
So here's what happened. So my parents came in '64. Right, so revolution is like January of '59. If you watch Godfather 2, January is '59. My parents gave it a chance. My mom didn't like it from the beginning. My dad thought it was going to do something, and then little by little, I started nationalizing everything. We're like, this is terrible, and you couldn't speak up and whatever. And it was like, all right. So '64, they got on a boat, and they it took them like 10 days. It took them they went like everywhere. So they finally got to Key West. During that time, it was like height of the Cold War. So both my parents are like getting interviewed by the CIA like heavily, because it's the missile crisis was 2 years earlier, Bay of Pigs was 3 years earlier, and Kennedy was just a year before Kennedy's assassination. Yeah. So it was a hot time. So and they finally there was I think they lived down here for like a little while. In 1978, I think it is, or 79, 78, 79. Is when Carter and the Castro they came to an agreement to because once you came over you escaped and you betrayed the revolution, you were not allowed back. So so that's why the earlier Cubans were a little bit more bitter about traveling to Cuba because they were not allowed back. My mom, my grandmother, when my mom's mom was sick, she was not allowed to go back because you're a traitor. So she just had to So a lot of people were separated. In 78 or 79 is when they finally allowed Cubans to go and visit their families. So that was like a huge deal. And then those Cubans got to see their relatives a little chubbier, wearing some blue jeans and whatnot, whatever. So that happened in the late 70s. And then 79, some Cubans steal a bus. They hop in a bus, they steal it, and they rammed the gates of the Peruvian embassy, seeking political asylum. They were like, we're fucking done. And so when that happened, I think that's when Castro says, and I think a shit ton of Cubans went in there. I think what Castro says, like, well, I'm not holding anybody back. Whoever wants to go, go. And fucking the next day, the Peruvians were like, we can't take any more Cubans. Like, we're done. And then that's when Carter goes like, all right, any Cubans seeking for freedom can come to the United States. And so there was boats, and then family members, people had boats here, chartered boats, and that's how that whole thing started. So then Castro looking like a fool, going like, oh, great, now half my population is leaving. Fuck that. I'm going to just clear up inventory. I'm going to free up my prisons and free up my asylums. And then basically went and forced these people to take, no, you're taking these motherfuckers that you don't know. Because people were just picking up their relatives. No, you're taking these people. And then that news came back of all the criminals are coming back or whatever. So the older Cubans here were freaking out. What's coming? We have no idea what's coming over here. These people have been over there for 10, 15 years. Are they communists? Are they not communists? Are they fucking crazy? Are they criminals? What's coming? So this was pretty tight. There is still an age restriction. In Little Havana, there is Domino Park, which is open for Cubans to go and play dominoes. If you go there now, to be a member, you have to be a member, and to be a member, you have to be over 50. So it's like an old man's domino club. But that was put in there to discriminate against the Mariel people. Because if you're in your late 50s, it means you got here in 59 or in the mid 60s. And they didn't want the Mariel people because they were different. And so they made it they couldn't discriminate. So they made it a membership, and they put an age restriction kind of separating that. So that's kind of how that whole hot mess came in. And those people got here, and they weren't wanted anywhere. They weren't wanted in Cuba. They weren't wanted in the U.S. And then the Colombians had this funny powder that needed to be distributed. So it's kind of it was a perfect little magical. And in the early 80s here, it was insane. You can watch Cocaine Cowboys to give you a little bit of that. But growing up in there, even though in my innocence of 7, 8, 9, I saw my neighbor's house grow, from a modest suburb house, now had a nicer driveway, had a bigger backyard. It just got bigger and bigger. And my dad, you knew what was going on, even in that young age. You knew where there was, and it was a lot of parties.
So, question about the kind of, I guess, the inner, discrimination among the Cuban community in, in Florida at that time. Did that kind of play into when, Tony's mother and her kind of disapproval, because they don't really establish when she came over, but you kind of
it's
go ahead.
They're going off of the 1932 version on that, because I think his mom was still kind of like, what are you doing, whatever. The only weird part for me in that is when she says, like, so is it still bodegas, you and the others? I'm like, there's no bodegas to mug in Cuba, because it's a fucking it's a state. But yes, no, that was I don't know what that. I mean, I think he was because he was a troublemaker or something.
No, I'm saying that line might be a giveaway there, because if she's saying, "Oh, is it still like?" then maybe she left like in '59.
Could be, yeah. Unless I don't. I guess we don't know where he's. Because I know Pacino's 40, but we don't know like the character, what like his upbringing would be. Maybe like. No, he would be a young kid. It would have to be before the revolution. But he'd have to be like a fucking 8-year-old or a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Or 12 years old. They have to be like 12 years old to be pre-revolution. Maybe. Yeah, no, those the Mariel people assimilated or were accepted by the late 80s, early 90s, or like part of the Cuban community. And then the new people to be watch out for was the rafters in the mid 90s. There was the three big immigrations. But anyways, to explain what happened there with the Mariel Bowl, that's what happened basically in Cuba. Like they ran that thing, and then the president opened it up, and that's why you had this huge 125,000 people came over within like, I don't know, weeks or months. Mm-hmm. It was a huge influx of people. And again, where are they going to go? There was no jobs. I mean, the economy wasn't ready for 125,000 people to just be welcomed into the city.
Right.
So what other trade is available for these people was the cocaine trade.
Yeah, and I mean in Scarface, we see him just as like, well, he and Manny are, just working at like a food truck, scrubbing pots and pans and stuff, just getting whatever work they can get. So
yeah,
no, it makes a lot of sense.
The other cool thing about why it's a good remake is because the 32 version, remember there's like a big disclosure in the beginning of like, this is what's going on in the country and this, that, whatever. There's a big disclosure because it was going on now. I don't know if Prohibition had ended already, but it was about Prohibition. It was something that had just happened. Capone was still around, and that was happening now. You know what I mean? For them. And then Scarface 83 version, like, this is right now. You know what I mean? So I think that's why it's such a good remake, because they're both making social commentary on what's going on at the moment.
And John, I don't know if you made this connection to a movie that we've covered previously. You can find it in the archives, Gabriel Over the White House, which comes out a year.
Oh yeah.
A year later, and definitely like takes on organized crime, and it's very much commenting on organized crime and its place in society. So yeah did you?
I wasn't thinking about that, but yeah, it's really cool to see some of these movies really commenting on the time. And the 1932 Scarface was, even though they hid this at the time, but directly influenced by Al Capone and
well, that was his nickname.
Well, yeah,
Scarface.
Of course, but they of course had to make sure to mention, oh, no. This isn't about him. It's a totally different guy. It's a totally different Scarface.
Right. Yeah.
They got visited.
So you were saying, it's very much the, that the 1932 Scarface was about what was going on at the time, as is the 1983. So I guess that kind of brings us to, because I was very much thinking about that and considering, the eternal question, what do we do with this? And it's worth mentioning that, I mean, like Scarface, particularly Brian De Palma's Scarface, has achieved such like cult status and is, it's like scripture, especially like the hip hop community, I think, especially in like the 90s.
Huge, yeah. No, huge, yeah. So you talk about a remake. How to remake it?
I mean, it's kind of
not necessarily how to remake it, but what else could be done with this? Because let's talk about what has been done. I know there's been a video game that was based on the 83 Scarface. I never played it.
Right. I have I played it for 2 minutes and I put it down. I can't own that game. It sucked my whole life.
Yeah,
it was
right.
way too much fun. But I have an idea because the other one is even though it's a remake, it feels like the definitive version so much. There's so much color to it. There's so much. It's just so to remake it'll be really hard, and to have to do it on something on now. And what's the now that you want to talk about? I would say is go Netflix series, and I want to do the before. So I want to do Miami 70, like late 70s before Tony shows up. I want the Diaz brothers. I want Casper Gomez. I want Frank Lopez rising to power. El Gordo, all the gangsters that you see in that club. I don't know if you guys remember in the 83 Scarface, they're pointing out all the, there's the Diaz brothers, there's Casper Gomez. They mention other drug dealers of the Miami, right? So I want to see those guys in the late 70s. I want to see Casper Gomez, the Diaz brothers, El Gordo, Frank Lopez rising to power, and all those guys fighting it out. In the meantime, flashing to like Montana in prison or getting in prison from the military or whatnot or whatever. You know what I mean? Rising it until like make Tony drive the bus and crash the Peruvians or whatever, get arrested for starting that, and then get released on the and then season 1 is just Miami in the late 70s, and it ends with the Mario boat lift of like here it comes, and then season 2 is Montana in Miami, and then that whole rise of power, and you take that over 2 seasons, and then the 3rd or 4th season, then it's the downfall. Then it's just a complete collapse of everything. And then you just killed it in 4 seasons. You're like, fuck it, that's it, no more.
In your vision of this series, so I'm imagining that like rather than just doing like a straight up remake of Scarface for like seasons 2 and 3 and maybe 4, that you would be able to kind of expand and show, you know, the law enforcement side of it, show the you know, like you said, explore the stories of these other people.
Yeah, and you can almost like play out the movie.
Yeah.
You play out the movie in a season and a half, but like take your time with each thing. You know what I mean, and really explore it even further.
Right, and I mean also, and this is a character that we haven't even talked about, but Mel Bernstein, you know, the crooked cop who's
the Harris Yulin
character. You know, that's a completely different story.
Yeah.
Like, how does this person get turned and start working for the other side?
You know, not to reduce it, but it's almost like a you know, Florida set Sopranos,
right?
With, I mean, again, you're rebooting. It's like you're, you know, taking Cuban immigrants in place of Italian Americans.
Yeah. Sopranos could be like the Goodfellas, the series. You know what I mean? Because it does like it almost give you like. Because I remember watching Goodfellas, reading Wise Guy, and then when I saw like the first 2 episodes of The Sopranos, I feel like I'm just like reading Wise Guy day by day, like living Goodfellas on a day-to-day basis is what The Sopranos kind of like felt to me. At least like earlier on. So yeah, and there's a lot of meat that Oliver Stone put in that script. There's like again, you just brought up Mel Bernstein. You're right. There's a whole fucking thing. We only see that guy like in 2 scenes, but there's like a whole world. There's a whole world to it, and then they mentioned so many people. Yeah, you could really expand that out and have a lot of fun. I think that's and that way you like don't fuck with the original. You give people the remake that they want, and you know what I mean. You give them what you get to cast another actor. You know what I mean, to like do it. You get like an actual Cuban actor. The other remake I thought in my mind was if you modernize it, did like the whole thing, but like now or like if Tony Montana came on wet foot, dry foot, like if he had to like fucking jump off a raft and fucking swim to South Beach. Because you can make it a period piece, even though Miami doesn't even look that much anymore. You would have to like dress up certain things. That's one part about the what's the Colombian one, the cartels when it's a Netflix series too. What's it called?
Narcos.
Oh, Narcos.
Or Queen of the South.
Yeah, Narcos basically is they show Ocean Drive, but you're showing me Ocean Drive now. Like that's not. Oh, like look at Ocean Drive in Scarface. Like, look how fucking you made a U-turn in a fucking '62 Cadillac. You couldn't make a U-turn in a smart car today. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that shit's like fucking jam packed. There's traffic or whatever. Those neon lights, like those buildings look a lot more decrepit when you watch Scarface. That's what it looked like back then. And in Narcos, you see them pretty pristine. You're like, yeah, you would have to like CGI some shit to show me like older. Miami's changed. Like New York, you still find like a block or two that still looks like 1920. But in Miami, it's a little less now. You have to find little nooks and crannies or go up north.
Well, I want to talk about a movie that came out in the early 2000s. And this is not, I'm not saying that this is in any way or should be associated with Scarface, but I do want to give a bit of a tip of the hat to another movie that takes place in Miami that's about a drug kingpin who
Bad Boys 2, right?
No, but
Blow.
Well, we can talk about that. But but here's what I want to talk about. It's a drug kingpin who he may supposed to be Cuban, but he's definitely actually played by an Irish person, and it's about this cartel who's taken down by an ex-cop and an ex-con, and it's called Too Fast, Too Furious.
Oh, funny.
And let me tell you, it captures all of the neon of Miami big time.
I gotta check that out. Yeah. It's one of the bridges that I think it's 836.
It's ridiculous.
It's one of the bridges, that they use.
Oh, okay, but that's with Cole Hauser playing.
Because I did I was a tour guide.
Kingpin.
I've been a tour guide a little bit through Little Havana, South Beach, but my last tour guide gig was on a boat where we go under 836. And one of the things is Too Fast, Too Furious, because that's where they race. And that's when you see,
that's funny.
That's the one that has like, doesn't have neon, but does have like these beautiful pastel lights hitting it from the bottom. So like if you ever see like Miami Heat playing whatever, you see like an aerial shot, you see the light, you'll see a lit up bridge. That's the 836.
Oh, yeah.
That's that takes you from Miami. That's one of the ways to get to Miami Beach. Even though in Scarface you have Ocean Drive, and Fontainebleau, and Frank Lopez's apartment is Brickell. So those are the three scenes are in Miami. The rest of that movie, unfortunately, is Los Angeles. Is LA.
Yeah.
Reason being, the whole thing was going to be Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't blame the city of Miami for not wanting Scarface to necessarily be shot there, considering how
at the time,
much it just uncovers the
Right. Well, the other thing too was we the Cubans landed in the South. We didn't migrate to New York. We landed in the deep South. That's what South Florida was. You know, it was good old boys. And here's a fuck ton of people. So there was that little resistance, and that's why. And there's a lot of bad press always, and a little discrimination. So it was a little tense. Yeah. And then with the Mariel boat lift, we got a lot of bad press. It was the Cubans. So when that movie that was 2 years later, they were making that movie like in '82. That they were making some drug movie, the community had just had it. And that's what they protested. I guess had we known that Stephen Bauer was in it, we probably would. I wish he had stepped out and like said, hey guys, relax or something. Yeah. And then we would have had the whole movie, but that's why they moved it over there. So it sucks that happened, but I mean, I understand why. It was at that time, it was a little tense.
Well, also, even if Stephen Bauer did come out and say something, it's not like today where we have social media where people can make a statement and everybody knows about it. You know, he would have had to have done a big thing. But I got to say, Stephen Bauer was awesome in the movie and I loved him.
Do you know who they were looking at for that part was Travolta.
Oh my God.
Oh, thank God.
I'm so glad they did.
Which is funny because I hit a moment when I was watching it where I was imagining, I was like, I don't think he would have been as good, but I was like, I wouldn't be so entertained by seeing Travolta as Tony Montana. I'd be so entertained by it, not for the right reasons.
I hear you. It's a better movie because of Stephen Bauer.
I told him what you told me to tell him. I told him I was in a sanitarium. No, man. It was a sanitarium, not a sanitation, man. No, you told me to tell him. No, thank God. No, but also because Stephen Bauer also offers the only legit accent in that movie too.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, and he coached.
Elizabeth Masterson did a good job, though.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Masterson did an awesome job, but
yeah. So my idea for this was kind of similar to yours, Cesar, but more focusing on Freedom Town and kind of just like the ecosystem inside of this, this area where it's these people who are kind of in limbo. They have no place to call their own. They're there whether they should be there or not. Yeah, I feel like there's just a lot of stories that could be told from these encampments.
In the movie, it's under a highway in Los Angeles. But in real life, there's a couple places, but one place they had a bunch was the Orange Bowl, where the Dolphins used to play, where the Miami Hurricanes used to play. Now with the Marlins, they knocked it down and made Marlins Stadium. But the Orange Bowl was where they housed a bunch of people doing the Mariel boat lift, where they were on limbo. The only time that they show Cubans in the Mariel boat lift is another terrible movie about Cubans with horrible. But it's with what's her name? The Italian girl from My Cousin Vinny.
Oh, Marissa Tomei.
Marissa Tomei. She plays a Cuban. I think.
Was it the Perez family?
Yes, Marissa Tomei. It's the Perez family.
Right.
You see them in the beginning in a stadium. That's why they're in a stadium. It was the Orange Bowl. That's where they were held. Yeah. But yeah, I can't. Yeah.
Is that like Armand Assante?
Yeah, that's a disaster.
Oh,
that
boy.
movie. I can't watch it. They also played him like really dumb.
I didn't see it, so I think
my cousin saw it. I tried to.
Well, maybe remake that and just do it better.
Well, right now there's a Cuban remake happening right now with Andy Garcia,
Dan,
Father of the Bride. They're making a third version of that movie, and it's going to be a Cuban version with Andy
that's
Garcia.
right.
Yeah.
We've talked about that.
They didn't cast me. I auditioned, but I didn't get cast.
That's great. Andy Garcia is awesome.
Well, fuck them. Maybe you can be in for the sequel. I don't know.
So
Dan, what would you do with Scarface these days?
So a lot of my idea has kind of been resonating throughout the conversation. The idea of feeling seen and of incorporating history and of not just telling a story of, rising through the ranks, this Shakespearean tale of, it reminds me a lot of the Scottish play of Macbeth and how he, hustles his way to the top. And I was thinking about, okay, well, the 1932 version kind of says like, all right, well, how have Italian Americans had to struggle past discrimination and systemic racism to achieve? And then I feel like Scarface was kind of like okay, well, now how have different governments and policies kind of put people in this position where there's not really a whole lot of other options, or at least not as it's shown in the movie. So, because you know what, it's like you can play by the rules and you can have a nice little house like Tony's mom does, or you can do what Tony does and end up with a palace and then end up, getting shot with like 2,000 bullets.
The world is yours.
So you want to make
right.
You want to make the Sidney Lumet version?
Hold on. I'm not there yet. Speaking of though influence, though, one of the greatest like rap songs of probably all time, the world is yours, Nas, from the Illmatic. So you have the influence. No. So what I'm thinking is, because one thing is, we don't ever have this moment where Tony Montana is like he was going in the right direction and then bad influences. He kind of he starts off like, we're introduced to him as like, these are the dregs of Castro's prisons. And, we know that he's already been, he talks about, he's like, hey, no, I'll do that. I'll cut that guy up just for fun.
Yeah.
So I was thinking of perhaps a slightly more sympathetic protagonist. And it made me think a lot about the, family separations at the border that we've been seeing. I mean, I know it hasn't just been the last 5 years, but, it's really been public. And I was thinking so much about these detention centers that they kept kids in that had, these like wall paintings of, just like, it was glorifying American propaganda. And like, even like Donald Trump, like paintings of like Donald Trump, and be like, hey, this is the guy who's putting, this roof over your head and that, foil blanket around your body. Sorry, it sounds like I'm making light of a very serious situation. I don't mean to, but because I think that there is a story to be told there. I think you could tell that story. You could tell the story of Dreamers. you know, people who were brought to this country as, you know, as minors. I don't like to even say illegally, but they were brought to this country not through the traditional means, did not go through the system. And they're, you know, the subject of a lot of controversy. So you could show like, all right, what happens when you have no home? You're in limbo, even when you didn't choose to be there. And you're kind of like, well, look, my parents dragged me up here. And whether it's that they're dreamers or whether it's like, look, my parents, you know, we got dragged up here because of, you know, really serious situations in, I'm sorry, I'm blanking it. I want to say Ecuador, but I don't know if that's the appropriate country. But just thinking like, you know, hey, I didn't choose this. This is where I ended up, and how am I going to get by? And who is going to help me get by? Who am I going to use? You know, kind of like that, you know, but also seeing more of a pattern of like, okay, this is not just what I'm choosing. This is what I've been told is my only option, because it's kind of like, it's almost that self-fulfilling prophecy of like the Fox News saying, oh yeah, migrant hordes of MS-13 gang members. And it's like, well, these probably weren't gang members, but what are you going to do? You're going to show them that, you know, you're basically going to shove them into that life, you know, potentially not guaranteed, but I'm like, it's like the question of like, who is our, you know, who is our Scarface? Where does our
you wanna
Scarface
like
come from to show like,
you want to Jokerify Tony Montana? Like he's this guy, and then he like, I'm gonna be this villain now.
We live in a society.
Well, not quite that far, but I mean like, because it's not just like this is this guy who's got like a lot of untreated mental illness. I want to have it as like, this is a kid this is someone who's come up and who's been extremely traumatized by, you know, like fleeing violence at home, the trip. Like I would honestly like go into the whole, you know, I would spend a good 20 minutes going into just the whole like.
What you're doing is basically, that would be like the correct remake, because it would be something that's happening like in the now. You know what I mean? So yeah, it is the now. So it would have to be. If we were making it now, it would have to be a Mexican or Central American or South American going through that whole journey. If it was like we're going with if you're going with Cuban Tony Montana.
Yeah, but I think we'd have to remove the person trying to sleep with their own sister.
Yeah.
But what if that comes from like, you know, okay, let's say we go with the, you know, that you know, Tony Montana kind of finds his crew in this detention center, and what if that's like a faux family, and if he ends up, maybe it's not his biological sister, I don't know.
Yeah, well,
you know, you can still, right. But I also think that plot line is kind of expendable.
I mean, I'm glad that they didn't get rid of it for the remake, because they made it better for the remake. But
right, well, and that's also the thing, is it's kind of like, how are you going to top like a coked up Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, you know, walking into Tony's office seductively?
My God. Incredible. Another thought that I had, of course, was just to kind of chronicle Sosa's experience.
The Sosa story.
Because what a great character. Yeah.
And you know what it made me think? I was like, man, I don't know who is the new Robert Altman. I don't necessarily know that there is or should be a new Robert Altman. But I was like, man, that would make a great Robert Altman, like Robert Altman's Freedom Town.
Oh, man.
That would be fantastic.
Well, especially since Cubans all talk at the same time.
Well, yeah, 'cause I was thinking about that. I was like, if you don't not just speak Spanish, but like speak the specific dialect that's being spoken there, like you're not going to have a clue what's going on. There's just, the screen's going to be covered with different colored like subtitles.
I say a Cuban story by Robert Altman will be a headache.
Oh. I'm going to add one more. What would also be really interesting is the telling of the writing of the original Scarface and having to dodge Al Capone's goons, and, you know, trying to get away with writing a movie about this person.
So basically, Mank. It would be hecked.
It's a little bit of Mank,
Yes,
a little, but feeling a little bit more like Argo. I think like trying to just like be slippery in the.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah.
Where's the Citizen Kane one of that? There's it's called RKO.
RKO 281.
Leaf
Right.
Schreiber playing Oliver Stone.
Yeah.
Great movie.
So yeah, and by the way, sorry, we one thing we skipped was just kind of like all of the other intended remakes and sequels.
Right.
So like there was hip hop artist Cuban Link who was going to be making a sequel called Son of Tony. And that was like 20 years ago.
Oof.
And then 10 years ago, there was going to be a remake with David Ayer screenplay and David Yates directing. And then in 2014, it was a Paul Atanasio script that would be set in Los Angeles following a Mexican immigrant's rise in the criminal underworld. And then in 2016, there was it was going to be Antoine Fuqua directing and Terrence Winter writing the script, Diego Luna starring. And then as of 2017, there was a Coen Brothers script.
Right. And I think that one might still be in the works.
Well, as of May 14th, 2020, and this is according to Wikipedia, it was that Luca I'm not going to be able to pronounce the name right. Luca Guadagnino. I'm so sorry. I'm not going to pronounce the name right. He directed the remake of Suspiria. He was going to direct with the Coen Brothers script, but who knows? Because we've also got Joel Coen. I think it's Joel Coen's Macbeth movie coming out later this year. So that's what. So Scarface. It's often talked about, but honestly, I think we've got some great ideas. So Hollywood, if you are listening and you want to add a 2021 entry to this Wikipedia section of Scarface remakes, we've got 3 for you here. You can make the checks payable to ruinchildhoodspod@gmail.com. Yeah.
So Cesar, why don't you shout out all of your social media stuff if you have any comedy shows coming up? I don't know what the scene is like in Miami right now with the COVID situation, but Florida. So
all bets are off.
There is the Miami scene is the Miami scene is actually the comedy scene is booming here. I was going out a bit last couple months. This month I've been a little busy, haven't gone out as much, and I'm working on a web series. I'm gonna do a web series on Hialeah, the town that I'm in. That's what I'm working on now. And Cesar G Comedy is my Instagram. I'll be posting there. I'm gonna be changing my name because it's Cesar Gracia, but it gets confused with Cesar Garcia so often. I'm sure I've done this years ago, but my great grandfather's last name is De Gracia, so I think I'm gonna change it to Cesar De Gracia because I don't know. But see, I'm in a movie, HBO Max with Paul Rodriguez, Chatovato. Opening credits, I'm Cesar Gracia. Closing credits, I'm Cesar Garcia. On IMDb, it's correct. So I've been dealing with it for way too long, and I've just been a little lazy about it. So I'm gonna probably do that. But now I had an actor friend of mine who I did a reading with not like 2 months ago for a short film. But he's got like autoimmune disease, and he got the fucking Delta variant. So that's the closest that I've known.
That sucks.
And I know people in LA and stuff like that, but as far as Miami, this dude got it, and it's kind of like I have people have gotten it and survived the old COVID, I guess. I've been lucky this whole time, and I got a 2-year-old, and I got a 3-year-old. So I was doing a lot of stand-up. I was getting back in it again. I was really loving it. So I really fucking miss it. And the scene here really is really blowing up a little bit. But right now I'm kind of I don't know. I might go back up in a month or so. I got to see how it's going to go down here a little bit. No one's getting locked down because we're in crazy town. We're in DeSantis's insanity right now. So, but it's not. Apparently, the numbers of hospitals. I haven't seen as far as people I know. I only know one person right now who's in the hospital.
Hope they get better soon.
I'm gonna hold out going on stage for a while. I'm gonna work on the web series. And I'll probably go back on stage maybe in a couple of months or later in the year.
But if people just keep track of your social media, they'll find out everything.
Find out, yeah. So Cesar G Comedy, I'll be posting there, and also be posting the web series and stuff like that. It's exploring a city that you didn't know about. Cool. It's basically Hialeah. It's a little city inside Dade County, Miami-Dade County, but it has a fun history. It has Emil Earhart flew out of here. Churchill visited here. The racetrack, a lot of stuff, but then it has this corrupt history as well. A lot of whatever you put up your nose probably got cut here in Hialeah at one time. So it's almost like / Brooklyn, Sicily of Miami.
Quick question: Is this?
Or the Bronx of Miami,
I remember back in the day you telling me that you went to a school that had been converted from an apartment complex. Is this where that school? Was that in Hialeah?
Yes. It's in Hialeah. Yes, that's where I grew up.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So there's a lot. My brother kind of started the idea of so yeah, I'm going to start talking about little things, little interesting things about this little town. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on right now, is just doing that, and then talking about jokes and Cuban jokes and all that kind of stuff.
Looking forward to it.
So Cesar G Comedy. Thank you, guys. Yes, this was a blast. I had a really good time.
No, thank you so much, Dan. Do you want to let everyone know what we're going to be talking about next?
Oh, yeah. So we're going from one iconic line in this movie. Cesar, do you want to let this one go? You haven't said it the whole episode. Go ahead.
Say hello to my little friend. The whole thing.
One iconic line to another. You're tearing me apart.
But no, not the one that you're thinking of.
What?
It's not The Room.
No, not The Room. Though there's definitely a James Franco connection, because we've got James Dean starring in 1955's Rebel Without a Cause. James Franco having played James Dean in a TNT biopic.
Right, and also not Earth Girls Are Easy again.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Right. No, we already talked about Earth Girls Are Easy, but no, we got Nicholas Ray directed. We've got James Dean, Sal Mineo, Natalie Wood, Jim Backus, Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, Dan, as you make your way up through the ranks of the Miami drug scene, I wish you a good journey. And Cesar, stay well, and everybody needs to follow him on social media.
All right. Good journey.